And let's get started.
Okay.
What it? Olá, pessoal, tudo bom? Eu sou a Jaque, do marketing daqui da Eufysio, né? E hoje eu que vou dar o início a essa mock class. Então, com vocês, nós estamos aqui com o Dave e com a Lara. Então, Dave, fique à vontade, pode começar. E o Dave
Well,
fala em português, então ele já me entendeu.
no, it's all good. I'm not gonna embarrass myself too much here. Oh, so anyway, yeah, so I can get started though. So all of you, for starters, welcome. My name is David Zacher. I'm a professor of philosophy at Elgin Community College. And today I'm here to give you an example of a class that you might have up at ECC. But before we get going, I want to invite you, and you don't have to, of course, but I want to invite you to turn on your cameras if you feel the urge. If you don't, that's perfectly fine. But I am going to ask you questions, and I would really appreciate it if you, got up the nerve just to answer a couple of questions. Okay? Is everybody good with that? So there's the first question.
Yeah.
No, ninguém está. No, all good. But it will go easier if I ask you some questions in a little bit and that you answer, because really in a class in the United States, we really do encourage students to engage in the classroom. So, I really try not to just lecture the whole time. I try not to talk the whole time. I like to ask questions, and the more that the students respond, the better the class goes for them. The less, and well, the better it goes for me too, honestly. So anyway, so my name's, like I said, my name is Dave Zacher. Have any of you ever taken, and you can just raise your hand if you want. And I see Camila has her hand raised, but any of you ever taken a philosophy class before? Anyone? Camila, is your hand up because you have something to say? No? Okay, can anybody raise their hand if they have taken a philosophy class before?
I see Larissa Fernandez raised her hand.
She did. I didn't see that. Where is Larissa? Oh, Larissa down there. Cool. It's because I know that in some Brazilian high schools, you can take a philosophy class. And in my experience, you all have gotten really good philosophy educations. I actually had an exchange student living in my house last year from Bahia. And we had great philosophical conversations. I was amazed at what you guys learned down there sometimes. Now, of course, that depends on your school. But anyway, so I sent out a handout for all of you, and I think it was sent to you in your email. And if you can open that right now on your own in your computer, or if you've printed it out, that's even better. If you can open that, I have some things I want to go through on that today. And that's one of the ways that we tend to engage students, is we give you something to do so that when we're going through things, you have something to focus on. Okay, you're not just taking notes, you're taking notes according to what we're really looking for, and answering questions that might show up on papers or show up in exams or homework later. Okay, so if you have that, please feel free to open it. And thank you, Jacqueline. I see that you shared that in the chat. So, okay, so to get started, what we normally do, I will share my screen here so you can get an idea on what you would see in a class. So oftentimes you get something that looks like this. You get a PowerPoint, okay? And then, of course, in the background, I might have a PowerPoint going and I'll be talking. And we often we try to start with a list of outcomes and just say, hey, this is what's going on in class. This is what we want you to learn. What do we, in this case, if I were teaching this and I was going to test you on it, I would ask you to define philosophy, for example. And then I would hopefully at the end of it, you would know how to explain the relevance of philosophy to everyday life. How does that connect to everyday life? And then we go into the specifics. What is Aristotle's four causes? So we'll get to that. But try to keep notes on this as you go. And then you get that real feel for what's going on here. Okay. So I'll just start. Does anybody have any idea what philosophy is? And you can even share it in the chat if you want. And I'm not sure if I'm going to see a chat come up because of the way this thing is presenting.
I can monitor the chat for you.
Okay. Well, if something comes up, let me know, please. Oh, I see a chat there. Well, that's still, yeah, feel free to ask questions. That'd be cool. Okay, so basically, if you want to understand philosophy, it's oftentimes really good, and this is true in a lot of disciplines, right? You want to start by asking, where does the word come from? And if you've had a philosophy course, I'm sure you've gone through this. But the word philosophy itself is an ancient Greek word that, well, a combination of a couple of ancient Greek words. One is philos and one is sophos. Philos just means love of, and sophos means wisdom. So a philosopher is especially interested in wisdom. They have this love for it. They have this desire for it. They want it, right? And that's true for capturing the essence of philosophy. But you still can get further into it with a definition, right? You can get into it according to how we actually use the word today. Well, what it comes down to really is we try to come up with a definition that captures this drive to know, this wonder that we feel for the universe, or the wonder that we feel for the world, like not what knowledge is. All of you have had this experience, right? You've been sitting on a beach somewhere and looking up at the, looking out at the ocean and just wondering about how far this horizon extends, and you're in wonder about how big the world is or something. You might want to do something like go study overseas, like at ECC. And if you do, you might think about what's it like to be in school at ECC, and how is that different than here? And what are students like in the United States, and what are they like here, and what drives us, and so on. Well, philosophy is driven by that drive, that desire to know. Now, Aristotle in particular really thought that's what drove philosophy. And that makes, so that fits right into what we think. But his focus was on that practical question. What's it going to be like when I go to school at ECC? Whereas a lot of people, but also ultimately, we tend to push it back as philosophers to not just ask, like, what's it going to be like, or am I going to be happy? Am I going to like it? But ask the question more like, what is happiness? What does it mean to like something? Why would I like something? What is a good reason to like something? And that's really what philosophy gets into. It's wondering about those big questions. So it's not just wonder about the world. It's that feeds it, but it's wonder about the big questions. What is happiness? What is a meaningful life? What does it mean to get an education? Those bigger questions that drive you. So they have a practical outcome, because if you know what happiness is, you can make a better guess at whether or not going to ECC would make you happy. You'd make a better guess about whether or not studying business or engineering or medicine is going to make you happier. Okay. But you have to know what that happiness is to really make sense out of those questions. So that's where we start.
Dave, you have a comment in the chat.
I do. That is
Yes.
awesome.
Susie says, I have always imagined that it was curiosity that drove people to think.
I think you are right on, Susie. Right? I mean, so is there something in particular that you think about when you start getting curious, Susie? I'm just leaving the chat open for you. I do appreciate you putting something in there. And if you want to answer that question, please feel free. Question the whys. Oh, okay, Susie. So I'm enrolling you in my philosophy class when you get here, because that's exactly what I want you to ask. Why? Okay, and that's what Aristotle wanted to know. He wanted to know why. And really, his why, and I've got a bunch of bio stuff in here about Aristotle. I'm not going to go into that right now. But Aristotle asked so many why questions that he actually, in some ways, started a lot of different fields, both in philosophy and outside of philosophy. As a matter of fact, if you study biology today, basically you're using the categories in biology, you know, genus and species and so on, that Aristotle created. If you're studying astronomy, you got to go back to the way Aristotle started astronomy and his understanding of the way the world, the planets move, the way we move, and so on. If you want to understand, if you take a logic class, I teach logic here, for example, and I spend the first half of the semester just on Aristotle's logic. If you want to understand ethics, right now in my ethics class, I'm dropping into Aristotle's ethics, and he wants to know why we should be good. So the question why is really important to people, like to all philosophers, but and people who wonder, and that's wonderful. You're right on track. But Aristotle in particular said, if you really want to go back, you really want to understand the why of something, you need to step back and ask, what are the causes of that thing? Okay, what causes that thing? Now, when he says causes, it's not exactly the way you and I would use the word causes. It's a little bit different. So what he would say is, if you want to understand something, you need to understand its four causes. And sometimes we change that to the four becauses. Don't get too worried about that. But if you look at the handout I gave you, you'll notice that I have a chart, a table on the second page, and it lists on the left-hand side the four causes. And here, well, I'm not going to pull it up because I got the PowerPoint going, but you'll see that this is a very common way for us to do things. We'll put a chart in and we'll say, okay, list these things off, but then explain them. So you got a description column next to it. And then next to it, you come up with an example. So in the four causes here, if I want to explain this, I'm going to say, the four causes are the material, the formal, the efficient, and the final. But these all mean something very particular for Aristotle. The material cause, the first cause, is what something's made of. Okay, so for example, if you have a pen or pencil, let's see here, let me pull a pen out. Oh, look at this, a pretty pen. It's got hearts on it. Okay, the first thing we can ask about this pen is what it's made of, and that would be its material cause. Anybody want to venture a guess? Anybody want to guess what this is made of? Or what your pen is made of? Go ahead and give me something, somebody. Boy.
Plastic. Somebody.
Plastic. Yay, Susie.
Metal,
Yeah,
somebody says.
Yeah, plastic and metal. Right? I mean, it's plastic and metal. There's something else in there, right? You got the stuff that goes on the pen, on the paper. So when I write, okay, I just wrote on my hand. It's the ink. Cool. Okay, so those are the material causes of a pen. Okay. Now, the formal cause of a pen is its structure, its shape, how those things are, the structure they're in. So what's the shape of this? Any idea? What would you call that? Anyone? What about you, Laura?
Cylindrical?
There you go. Right? You can say cylindrical, right? It's a cylinder. It's long and it's round, but it's also hollow inside, right? Because it's hollow because the shape isn't just the formal cause isn't just the shape of it. It's also the fact that inside of the cylinder is empty space, and in that you have the piece of metal. So the plastic is on the outside, the metal's on the inside, and the ink is inside that metal strip or whatever that's in there, right? Or maybe it's a plastic strip. But anyway, there's another cylinder inside filled with ink. And part of the formal cause is the fact that the ink is on the inside, not the outside, okay? Now, so you've got the material cause, what it's made of. You've got the formal cause, what its shape is, and the structure it's in. You have the efficient cause. Now, the efficient cause is just a fancy word for, or a fancy term for the things that brought it into existence. Okay, so for this pen, there was probably a machine that stamped out the plastic, that molded the metal, that filled the inner shaft with ink, and so on. It could have been done other ways. A different machine could have done it. It could have been done in different orders. They could have filled the ink first and then put that filled cylinder inside the plastic. A person could have carved it. It'd be a funny thing to do, but an individual person could have done this. So notice here, material causes. A pen can be made of a lot of different things. Now, this one's made of plastic and metal and ink, but you could imagine that it's made of something else, right? Right? You could think of it as made of wood. Thank you. To be made of wood. Now, wood would work. Paper would work. Some things work better, right? A paper pencil probably isn't going to work too well, right? If I had a paper pencil, here's my paper pencil, or my paper pen, sorry. It might be nice and ecological, exactly. But notice when I go to write with it, it's not going to write very well. So you could probably do it. It's not going to work too well. So some things are better than others, but you can do it with different things. You can make it with different things. You could have different structures, right? You could put the ink in a different spot. You don't want to put it on the outside because that's not going to work too well. You could have a different shape, right? You could make a pen out of a ball with a little point out of the end of it, and you write like this, okay? So the material cause, something can be made of a lot of different things. The formal cause, the structure, the shape, can be a lot of different shapes or structures. Now, there are limits on those. The efficient cause, what brought it into existence? Lots of different things could bring it into existence. It can be put together in different orders. But the final cause is really important. That's the most important one for Aristotle. The final cause is its function. So what is a pen supposed to do? Right, exactly. Right, and if a pen does that, let's see here. Actually, funny thing is this is an excerpt from the textbook. This is a piece of paper from my textbook that fell apart today for my philosophy class. Anyway, this pen, when I write on this sheet of paper, I don't know if you can see that. Looky there, it worked. So this thing functions like a pen. It does exactly what a pen's supposed to do. It writes. Now, if it has a different function, it's not a pen anymore. Okay. What's this thing? Easy question, right? It's a phone. A cell phone. Awesome. What is a cell phone supposed to do?
Oi.
Oi? Quem falou? A million things. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, for me, a phone is supposed to be something you call on because that's what I grew up with. But you're right. A cell phone does millions of things. You're exactly right. But one thing it doesn't do is you don't write with it, right? Yeah, no cell phone markers. Okay, so you looked at the main purpose of a cell phone, you're right, is to make the phone call, but you can use it for lots of different things. You can use it to text. You can use it to look things up. You can use it to take notes. You can use it to join Zoom classes, and so on. But now, what makes it a cell phone is that you make a phone call. What makes something a pencil is that you can write with it. What makes something a cell phone is that it does all these different things. Phone, you can make phone calls, you can text on it, you can take notes, you can take pictures, and so on. You're right; those are all things that it can do. But those things are what make it what it is. You can have different material causes. You can have different formal causes. You can make these things out of a lot of different materials. They made of plastic, metal. You can probably make it at least partially with wood. You can't make the current transistors with wood, obviously. It can be in a lot of different shapes. You guys all have bigger or smaller cell phones. They might have a little different edges on them. You could even make them that fold and so on. Different machines, different people can bring them into existence. You can do it in different orders. But what makes it a cell phone is it does what cell phones are supposed to do. Okay? Now, if you want to understand something, that's how you do it for Aristotle. But one of the things that a lot of people wonder about is the soul. Okay, so this is where I'm jumping into something that might surprise you a little bit, coming from the four becauses. Okay. Now, one of the big things that people ask about, like along with how, what does it mean to be happy, or what does it mean to be successful, or what is an education? A lot of you probably want to know whether you have a soul, right? And if you have a soul, does it go on to exist after you die? And philosophers have a lot of different answers for this. If you go back to Plato, Plato thought that we had a soul that existed separate from the body, that to understand the world, you understand it through your mind, which is the window to your soul. Okay. And, a lot of you, my bet is a lot of you are probably Catholic. I mean, Brazil is a primarily Catholic country. Some of you are not Catholic. You might be something else. You might be another Christian denomination. You might be something else altogether. You might be part of, you might be Jewish, or you might be Muslim. You might be, you might practice candomblé. I don't know. There are all sorts of things you could be practicing, right? Or maybe you're an atheist. I don't know. You could be a lot of things. But one question that does come up is, no matter what you believe there, is there a soul? And what happens to it when you die? Now, Western monotheisms, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, all believe there's a soul that exists separate from the body. Plato thought there was a soul that existed separate from the body. But Aristotle, he went a different way. He actually said, no, when you die, it's gone. It's completely gone. And the reason he thought that is because of his understanding of the four causes. Okay? That's really what starts it. So, when Susie said we want to know why, that's really what the drive for philosophy is to understand why things are the way they are. But when you get an answer, you've got to follow that answer to its logical end. So for Aristotle, the ultimate why is exactly what are the causes of things. That's the ultimate why. Because if you want to understand something, you got to understand all those four things, and that'll answer the why for you. Okay? So what is the soul? And can it exist beyond death? And why? Well, go to the four causes. So what does he say about that? Now, for Aristotle, the soul is the ability to do something. And it's the ability to do something in particular. Now, a marker or a pencil can do something, but it does something because we make it do it, right? We draw with it. But for Aristotle, the soul is an animating force. Okay? It's the force that you have, or that any living thing has, which animates that thing, which makes that thing move, grow, live. Okay? So that's the soul for Aristotle. The soul is an animating force. Whatever force drives living things to live. But that means there's going to be many different kinds of souls. Okay? There's going to be the nutritive soul, he calls it, something called the sensual soul, and something else called a rational soul. And he uses those three souls to distinguish things that he's already distinguished in biology. Okay? Because he distinguishes plants from animals, from humans. Okay? So If all three of those things are different, they've got to have different kinds of souls. So now, what are those souls? The nutritive soul is that animating force that your body has, that any body has, that anything that lives has, to take in nutrition, to produce energy from that, to grow, and to reproduce, to have offspring. Okay? And notice that plants have that, non-human animals, so dogs, cats, monkeys, cows, they all have this. And you do too. You're a human being. You can take in food, you can grow, you can reproduce. Don't do so yet, you're still too young, and so on. Now, the sensual soul is that part or that animating force that allows something to have sensations. So if you take your hands and you touch the desk in front of you and you feel that desk, you might feel some cold, you might feel some warm. You might look, you're looking at the screen, and those are sensations that you're getting through the eyes. You hear my voice. I'm sorry about that, but you hear my voice. You might get bored hearing my voice and get up and walk away. That's locomotion. You might get hungry because I start talking about pizza or something. So you get hungry, so you go find some pizza. Those are all things you can do because you have a sensual soul. Now, plants don't have that. Plants don't, they don't see the sun. Now, granted, it's possible that they have a physical reaction to the sun, but it's not the same as what you and I would have. You and I can look at the sun and say, wow, I want to get a suntan and go sit in the sun. Or, ooh, that feels warm. Let me lay in the sun. That feels warm. Or maybe, wow, that sun is hot. I want to move out of the sun. Okay. We can do that. Animals can do that, but plants can't. You can want pizza. Go get pizza. Animals can do that. Plants can't. Okay. So just to rehash, you, plants, and animals all have a nutritive soul. You and animals, non-human animals in particular, have a sensual soul. But there's something that we have that other animals don't have. And that's something called a rational soul. Okay, I like curiosity. Because I'm curious and I wonder why. How many of you have a pet? Anybody gonna raise their hand on that? Okay, Susie does. What do you have, Susie? And anybody else, what do you have if you have a pet? I'm willing to wait. A crippled bird. What happened to the bird? What happened to the bird? Did it get its wing hurt or something? Is that why you have it? Okay. It was electrocuted. Remind me not to be your pet, Susie. Geez. Okay, so you found it hurt. Okay, that makes me feel a little better. So you're saving the bird. Okay, that's good. Yeah, so my example isn't going to work great with a bird because I'm not sure you train birds very much, although maybe you do. I know birds are pretty smart. But I have a dog, and I know that a lot of Brazilians don't have dogs because I know that oftentimes they're used for protection, but they're not oftentimes used as pets, although that's changing now, I think. But I have a dog. Okay, I always have had dogs. And last week I walked into my living room and I sat down on the floor and I had a piece of pizza. Okay, a lot of cheese, had a lot of meat on the top. And I took that pizza and I set it on the table. And my dog came in. My dog's name is Stanley. I said, Stanley, because he looked at the pizza. And you know what he's thinking? He's thinking, I want that pizza. And he looked at that and I said, Stanley, no. And I got up, I left the pizza in his reach. I walked into the kitchen, got something to drink. I got some hot sauce to put on the pizza. I came back into my living room, and that pizza, it was still there. Now, Stanley was sitting next to the pizza, and he's staring at the pizza, right? He's staring. There's drool coming out of the side of his mouth. You know, he's licking his lips. He's like, okay. And Stanley, what he thought, I think, was probably something like this. Pizza, yum, ouch. Okay, okay, I don't beat my dog. But if I did beat my dog, okay, if I did hit my dog would think pizza, yum, ouch. That hurts because I ate Dave's pizza, right? Now, it just so happened that the other day, my daughter was making cookies. And she made this nice big batch of chocolate chip cookies. Okay, and I don't know if any of you have ever had chocolate chip cookies. I hope that you have, because it's life-changing stuff, right? And she made this big batch of cookies, and I love chocolate chip cookies. And she set the cookie plate on the table that she was going to take to a friend's house. And she looked at me because she saw me drooling, licking my lips. And she said, "Dad, no." And I thought something in my head. I thought, I want those cookies. But what I thought was not the same thing Stanley did when he saw the pizza. When Stanley saw the pizza, he went, pizza, yum, ouch. When I saw the cookies, I went, cookies. Ooh, those look really good. But my daughter said not to eat them because she's taking them to a friend's house. And I want to be a good dad. Part of being a good dad is that I don't eat the cookies my daughter made to take to her friend's house. Okay, so notice the difference in thought patterns. For me, I had this ideal out there, being a good dad. And I said, I want to be like that. My dog did not go like, hey, my dog didn't say to itself, hey, I want to be a good dog. What does it mean to be a good dog? Being a good dog means you listen to your master. My dog didn't do that. My dog just thought pizza, yum, ouch. Okay, so a rational soul is the ability to perceive, but to have not just sensations, but to perceive from those sensations and reason about it and think abstractly. I can come up with this idea about what it means to be a good human. My dog can't come up with an idea about what it means to be a good dog. I don't think a bird, now birds are smarter than dogs, they really are, but I don't think a bird comes up with the idea of, what would it mean to be a good dog? Or I'm sorry, a bird wouldn't ask that, I guess. A good bird. Okay, he might make himself clear as to what he wants, but I bet you he's not thinking, how can I manipulate Susie into getting what I want? Let's see. Humans, they like it when I repeat their words. So I'm going to repeat my words so Susie gives me something to eat. That's not going to happen, right? At least not in the same way it does for humans. So we have, I think, a rational soul in a way that animals don't, and certainly in a way that plants don't. Okay? So, Marsilio, what does Marsilio have to say? Anyway, sorry, this came up in the chat. Now, we have this capacity for rational thought that other animals don't have. These souls are what we call nested. So kind of like a bird has a nest, right? But what we mean by that is that a rational soul can only exist if it has a sensual soul also. And a sensual soul has can only exist if it has a nutritive soul. And yes, your dog can manipulate things, but it doesn't do so by thinking, how can I manipulate? What a dog does is says, I want the food. What can I do to get the food? right? It's a different process, okay? And I agree, cats can manipulate too, but the thought process is probably very different from the way you and I do that. Now, maybe Aristotle's wrong. Maybe animals can do this, but that's what Aristotle was saying, okay? Now, what sort of implications does this have for an afterlife? So if the soul is this ability to do things, to function as a human being, to function with a human soul, you have to think rationally. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe animals do think rationally. But the point here is to have a rational soul, to be a human being, you've got to think rationally. Okay. You've got to actually act rationally. You've got to actually do things that imply rationality. Okay. Now, for Aristotle, if you think about it, let's go back to those four causes for a second here. So let me slide back to those. Whoop. Okay, so you got the four causes. Now, this pen is made of something. It's made of plastic and ink and metal and so on. And it's in a certain structure. Now, the metal, plastic, and ink can only exist if it exists in a structure. Now, it could exist in a pile. That's still a structure. Not a very good structure, but it's a structure. The structure cannot exist, according to Aristotle, unless it's in something. So there's no cylinders unless there's something that's in a cylinder shape. Okay? And writing, most importantly, this can't happen. Okay? That can't happen unless there is something doing that. That there is something that is in a physical, that has made of material and has a shape. Okay? So what does this mean about the soul? Well, for us to function, there has to be material and there has to be a form. Okay, and there has to be something that brought us together and that, that made us, and that's something to do with reproduction, and you don't have to go into that detail. But the point here is, for Aristotle, for something to function, for that fourth cause to happen, and us acting rationally is functioning rationally. For that to happen, there has to be a physical thing in a physical form that's doing the functioning. So when you die, according to Aristotle, there's no functioning going on. Okay? And if there's no body, there's no body to function. If there's no body to function, there can't be a soul. The soul can't exist separate from a body. That's an implication of his idea. That's what follows. That's the logical consequence of his ideas. You can agree with him or disagree with him. But the point is that if you follow the logic of his ideas, they take you to the idea that there is no afterlife. Because after your body dies and disintegrates, there's no functioning going on. No functioning going on, there's no you. Okay? Now, I will stop this really quickly here. Just make sure I'm still on time. Okay, I got a couple more minutes yet here. At this point, any questions? Again, you can disagree with them. That's not my point. But to follow his reasoning is important here. Okay. Now, if you have a question, go ahead and throw it in the chat or speak up, whichever. There was an interesting result from all of this. So let me start here. Aristotle was really influential in the early Catholic Church. Okay, and the no afterlife thing was problematic, but they did take his idea of the soul and apply it to the unborn, to embryos, fetuses, and so on. And the early Catholic Church argued that because the embryo, so the early developing child in the womb, is not functioning like a human being. So there is no human there. Historically, for the majority of the time the Catholic Church has been around, their abortion is not the killing of a human being. There is no human being there. Human beings don't occur until there's something actually functioning like a human being. So St. Thomas Aquinas, one of the most famous, one of the most influential Catholics of all time, said, until that baby in the womb starts moving around and starting to function like it might be human, until then, we know it's not a human. So there was nothing, if you had an abortion in the early stages of pregnancy, at least, that was not killing a human being. So the church, the Catholic Church, officially accepted that view. In 1312, it was written into their doctrine that early abortion is not killing a human being. Now, in the 17th century, that changed. So this is a new view for the Catholic Church. Now, they didn't think it was right to abort, but they thought that for a different reason. They didn't think they were killing a human being. They just thought they were killing something that was going to become a human. And by the way, that's why you should only have sex if you're going to have sex with the intent of having a baby. Okay, historically, that's what the Catholic Church has felt. But it's not because you're killing a human being that you can't have abortion. It's because this thing is going to turn into a human being. Okay, so that's just an interesting point. So I did look up. I know that abortion has become a bit of an issue in Brazil recently, and legalization has been talked about. It's not, I know that I don't think it's anywhere near as prominent in politics today in Brazil as it is in the United States, but it's still starting to pop up a little bit more. And just FYI, in case you guys don't know this already, it is illegal to have an abortion in Brazil unless it's to save a woman's life, a mother's life, or in the case of rape, or if there is the situation called anencephaly, and you can look that up. It means it doesn't have a brain. It has a brain stem, but no brain. And you can talk details about that some other time. But notice here that question about whether that is a human being informs your view about whether abortion is okay. So when Susie said, yeah, the question about why, that wonder, why should abortion be legal or illegal? Why should abortion be considered moral or immoral? The why is very important here, right? And if you follow Aristotle, like the early church did, having an abortion up to a certain point is not murder. Okay. Why does the Catholic Church think it is murder now? Because somebody looked through a microscope in the 17th century, so in the 1600s, somebody looked through a microscope and saw a little embryo and said, it looks like a human, so it must be a human. That's why they believe that. They don't believe it because there's nothing in the Bible that says abortion is wrong. Okay, that's a view that's just not clear. So if you want to know why abortion is considered immoral, according to many faiths, Judaism doesn't normally think of abortion as wrong because the Bible didn't say anything about abortion being wrong, unless the husband doesn't want it to happen. But that's a whole other story. Christianity only thinks it's wrong recently, and so on. So anyway, so notice here, I asked you a lot of questions. If you were in a classroom here at ECC, I'd probably be asking you a lot more questions. And of course, you would be here face to face, so you can't just turn off your camera. Okay, you'd have to. I'd call on you. So if that scares you, beware when you come to ECC. But if you want to get engaged, if you want your idea to think about why you believe what you believe, if you really want to be part of the examination of why, then this is the place to come. Okay, and we'll push you on that in class. Anyway, so that's about all I got for you. Of course, wrapping it up, I would come back to these outcomes and say, okay, so can you now list the 4 causes? Can you now give me an example, an original example, not the pen, but something you think of? Can you now understand or categorize things into different souls and so on? But that's it. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn it over to Jacqueline and Laura. So if you have any questions, you can ask me, Jacqueline, or Laura, and we'd be happy to answer what we can answer. Thank you all, by the way, for at least your images paying attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Zacher. It was very engaging, and I have to admit, I think I need to take a philosophy class now.
I hope so. Well, I don't think you have to, but I'd love to have you in it.
Well, we want to open things up for questions now from you all, whether they are questions regarding the class that Professor Zacher just gave you a little sample of, or whether you have any questions about Elgin Community College or perhaps about international student admissions. We do want to leave a few minutes at the end here for any questions. Just to kind of briefly introduce myself, because I don't think I did so at the start. My name is Laura, and I do international recruitment and international admissions at Elgin Community College in partnership with Effigy. And just to give you some very brief details about us, we are located just outside of Chicago. We're about 60 kilometers northwest of Chicago, so we're part of the Chicagoland greater suburbs. You can reach out to us directly if you have any want any information about our school, and of course apply through Effigy. And I do want to mention that one of the benefits of applying through them with their partnership with us is that until December 1st, we do have an application fee waiver. For any of you who are interested in perhaps starting classes in January or even in August for next fall. If you get that application in before December 1st, we do have that promotional benefit for you. I do want to put our email address in the chat too, in case you do have any other questions about our school. And Jacqueline, maybe you can put your information in there too, in case they don't have it to reach out to you. And we'll just open things up for any questions that you guys might have for the last couple minutes here. And thank you all so much for joining us.
Pessoal, ninguém tem nenhuma pergunta para o Dave, para a Laura? Bom, gente, se vocês tiverem alguma pergunta, vocês podem perguntar tanto para mim aqui da IFIG, né? Manda pra gente aqui. Se não, ou vocês podem mandar para os contatos, né? Que tanto o Dave quanto a Laura deixaram ali no chat. Só salvar esses contatos também, alguma dúvida relacionada à aula ou à escola, também pode estar perguntando pra gente. Dave, Laura, muito obrigada. Thank you very much, Dave and Laura. And muito obrigada, pessoal, pela participação de vocês. E ficamos por aqui. Até a próxima mock class, pessoal. Thank you, guys.
Ciao.
Thank you so
Tchau,
much.
tchau.